Not too long ago, I made a video talking about the most likely Raptors to be traded before this year's deadline, but it actually seems like there's a lot more availability with the main core than maybe was originally thought. That's what we're going to be talking about today. What's up, everybody? It's JJ Buckets. I've told you what we're doing in terms of the video topics, so just the usual drill before we hop into things. Just make sure you are leaving a like on the video. It takes a second, it makes a huge difference for me, so thank you. And if you're new here, subscribe to the channel as well. Plus, if you plan on doing any responsible sports betting in the near future, just make sure to check out my link in the description below for a really nice sign-up bonus. Other than that, folks, let's hop into the video. One of the things that we keep hearing over and over again is the fact that OG is unhappy in Toronto at the moment. And now look, I understand. It's rumors, and obviously OG Anunoby has not outright come out and said that he doesn't like being in Toronto, that he's unhappy. Although OG also doesn't strike me like the type of guy that would actually do that, even if he was. And that's kind of, obviously that's me interjecting my own kind of like feelings on the situation here. But it does kind of rub you in the way where it's like, you know, when there is smoke, there is fire. And the fact that we're hearing this again and again, you know, it's one of those things where it's like at the end of the day, you're going to look at it and be like, hey, it's just a rumor mill. But at the same time, it's like, you know, it's a persistent rumor, right? I don't think it's any secret that OG's trade value, quite frankly, might be at its all-time high, considering how elite of a defender he's been. And the fact that, you know, he's still young enough that you can look at him and see room to grow as a player, and he would be a valuable add, quite frankly, to any team trying to win a championship this season, both for his defensive impact, for his shooting off the ball, etc., etc. Like, he could be a really good complementary piece on a championship team. So there is, I think, a lot of desire around the league for a guy like OG Anunoby. Again, like, he's a player that you can really put into most situations and it would be a seamless fit, although quite frankly it doesn't seem like the case here in Toronto of late this season. So it's an interesting one, right, where his stock is at an all-time high. You maybe have some other rumors kind of growing about who might stay, who might go, and I'll get into that in a second with the Raptors. So a guy that maybe did not feel like he was incredibly readily available before feels a little bit more available now. And granted, I still don't think he's like on the block or anything in terms of like, yeah, the Raptors want to get rid of this guy. I do feel, at least my own feelings on the matter, whereas a few weeks ago, earlier in the season, whatever, I would have thought, yeah, OG's probably not one of the pieces that you move. I think the closer we get to this deadline, I feel like there's a bigger chance that he actually might be moved. And speaking of guys where there's a bigger chance that they might be moved, Kevin O'Connor recently, which I'm not a huge fan of the Ringer, but Kevin O'Connor is one of the guys from there that I actually do really enjoy listening to talk about basketball. You know, he recently talked about the fact that even Pascal Siakam might be somebody that's available. Obviously, all of these situations naturally are for the right price. Like, you're not giving up Pascal for pennies on the dollar. You're going to want a sizable haul coming back, which includes, I believe he was talking about something along the lines of, you know, young talent that could be equal. Obviously, nothing like not directly equal to the player that Pascal is now, but equal in terms of value of where you see that young player in the future, or a bunch of unprotected firsts. And that's like the Pascal situation is interesting to me because beforehand I would have sat there and I would have gone, hey, look, you know, next to Scotty Barnes, which is obviously at the, you know, peak of all this, Pascal's probably your next guy that's just really not somebody that you're gonna trade. But and look, this isn't me, I'm going to preface this before I even get into the but. This isn't me advocating for a Pascal trade by all means. I love Pascal. I think he's a fantastic player. Like, he's one of the 15 to 20 best players in basketball. So if you're even going to talk about moving him on this team, the return has to be damn good. But again, similar to OG, it seems like he might be a little more available than originally thought. Now look, with Pascal, I still do think it would take a really healthy ransom for the Raptors to even give thought, even obviously more so than OG. But again, another guy that you know, you start to look at and you're like, you know, probably not going anywhere, but whereas before you would almost outright rule it out, now again, the closer we get to the deadline, the more you kind of sit and look at it and go, you know, probably still on this team. like all likelihood still on this team past the deadline. But there is that little room of doubt, I do believe, that didn't exist before. Now, on the other end of things here, so a guy like Trent Jr., who's been constantly popping up in trade rumors all year, is kind of going in the other direction with what the rumor mill has to say about him. You know, there is reportedly a willingness from Trent Jr. to want to stay in Toronto. He likes Toronto, allegedly. And now it seems like there's a little more willingness, you know, from the Raptors side to actually keep him around, which I think really does change. Obviously, when I did that video originally talking about the most likely Raptors to be traded, I actually had Trent Jr. at the top of the list just based on the sheer volume of rumors that we heard about Trent Jr. And because at the time I really thought it was him or Fred that would be 1 and 2. You know, you could interchange, I don't want to say you could interchange them, but they were pretty close, like neck and neck in terms of who's most likely to go. Now I feel like there's a little more credence to to Gary staying on this team long term. And quite frankly, I think that's fine. But here's the thing, obviously, if Gary is staying, and if that's kind of the direction that we're leaning in, that actually ties it all the way back to the beginning point, or the beginning talking point with OG Anunoby, where I feel like if Gary is suddenly being interjected into future plans, there's a good chance that, you know, a guy like Fred is obviously maybe more likely to be out the door, which I know a lot of Raptors fans, you know, my feelings notwithstanding, but I know a lot of Raptors fans would celebrate that, which is a conversation I already had and a conversation I don't want to have on this video. But somebody like him, I think if Gary's trending in the direction of staying, I think obviously Fred is trending even more so in the direction of leaving. And in that same sense, I think a guy like OG is probably, there's a good chance he's trending in the direction of, yeah, he might be gone too. Again, maybe not necessarily this deadline, although I do think there's a very realistic chance now, a much more realistic chance than I would have thought so a few weeks back. So basically, this can all be summed up, and obviously there's the ever-evolving nature here of before the trade deadline. If I can wrap it up nicely, the only guy that I really do think on this roster is untouchable heading into the deadline is Scotty Barnes, by definitions of untouchable, in terms of like, yeah, this is an asset that we just will refuse to move. I do think a guy like Precious is probably relatively safe, although I wouldn't use the expression untouchable for it, but yeah, like Precious Jewell is probably going to be on the team moving forward. But it does seem like a lot of the rest of the core, there's at least a willingness to shake it up given the right price. And I think that's the major takeaway from this video here. What do you folks think? What do you believe, or what do you not believe about the updated rumor mill talking about just, quite frankly, the increased availability of this Raptors team? Naturally, like I said, everything would have to be at the right price, but what do you folks think? Again, just let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about who's staying and who's going at this deadline, or hell, how I did it a few weeks ago in terms of the video talking about the most likely Raptors to be traded. Give me yours in the comment section below. Other than that, folks, again, usual drill, because we're pretty much at the end of the video. If you enjoyed the video, if you're still watching, just hit that like button for me. It doesn't take a lot of time, and it does make a huge difference for me, so I really do thank you every time that you do it. And if you're new here and you're still watching and you enjoyed what you watched today, just subscribe to the channel as well. Good for at least one video a week. You know the drill if you've watched this channel before. Other than that, folks, it's been JJ Buckets. It's been fun, and I will see everybody next time.